record. Just go. Okay, well, we had technical difficulties, but that's what happens.
That's a shame. That is the lost podcast of the, what is this called? The
Gen Z perspective.
The Gen Z perspective.
Yeah.
I should do my homework on this podcast.
You should do your homework on this podcast.
Yeah, and like learn what it's called.
Oh, I thought you were talking about your homework for school.
No.
Like just on the podcast.
I should do my homework for school too. It's probably something I'll get to after this.
No. I'm more thinking like the next time you get an assignment, just quote this podcast as a reputable source.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. That's why it's called a Gen Z perspective. Literally the uneducated class of society.
Do you know how to quote a podcast? Like, how do you do a citation for a podcast?
I think the person who is the owner or speaker on the podcast has to be reputable of and on themselves.
Well done.
Yeah, they need some kind of credentials for what they're saying, and then two, I think it's a timestamp.
First year undergrads. So
yes.
that should be good enough, I think.
Oh yeah, check 100%.
Okay.
At top 40 university in the world.
Top 40.
Yeah, top 40 in the world.
Hey, that's pretty impressive. That
It
is
is.
something.
It is.
That is a good reason to have that is a qualification in itself.
Don't even have 1 year under our belts and we're already full of
we
shit.
have one term under our belts, and we decided to record a podcast. Because
Yeah. Okay, so let me give you some preface. So the people who have listened to this from back home, they understand. You haven't done any research, so I'll just give you a brief rundown. One, people listening, this is my friend Sarin. I met him here at university, and I decided I wanted to start podcasting again because many of the people here fit the description of individuals I was interested in talking to back home when it comes to people who enjoy having intellectual conversations but also have a opinion about a subject they're passionate about, which is the primary idea.
Well, it's good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for welcoming me onto your your highly prestigious podcast. I'm sorry. I can't stop making those jokes.
No, it's fair, bro. The thing is, the thing is this is nothing. But the idea is, maybe you'll stay around and you can help me host, and we'll have other guests on, and it'll just be a fun thing.
I'd love to.
As much as we don't have time for hobbies, I would love to add in a third or fourth hobby into our life.
Well, let me just get something out of the way. Future me, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry for everything.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get canceled for sure.
Yeah, but it's part of the process.
It is. It really is.
We are on an intellectual journey, and sometimes you just have to start at square one.
Square one.
And hopefully, by the time if future me is listening to this, I will be at square two at least.
Square two.
So
what's square two?
I don't know.
Like where you're at, just times itself. So you're just.
Well, fuck. I guess nowhere then. I guess I'm not going anywhere.
0 times 0. No, you'd be at. Oh yeah, no, that's still 0. There you go.
Yeah. I guess I'm at square 0.
You're at square 0 right now. You're fucked for life, man. There's nowhere to go.
That's all right.
Okay. So, first episode back. I wanted to rehash a conversation that I had with Seth and Troy a while ago about education, because originally I was super against university education. I was super pro education in general, but when I made those statements, I had no context. I had no frame of reference, and I had nothing to really contribute beyond how I felt. Now, being a prestigious first year undergrad with 0.
Very prestigious.
Very, very prestigious. I have more opinions, I guess is what I'm saying. Some good, some bad. Some I fucking still hate school so much and think that it needs to be shifted. Like today you talked to me about bell curves. Is that what it was?
I did teach you about bell curves today.
Dude, what a fucking stupid way of grading kids.
It's just of that idea that there can only be a few of the best, right? I guess the concept of the best is everyone cannot be the best. That's why there's the NBA. It is the top 0.0001% of athletes who can also play basketball. They are the best of the best.
Right.
That concept applies everywhere.
So to give some context, bell curve is the best of the best in a specific test.
The bell curve is based off the concept that there has to be the best of the best. So our class of undergraduate first years in UBC is the best. Sure, I'm not calling us the best, but we are a very, very smart class, a smart group of students.
Supposedly.
Or
you're rich. Or you're rich. One of the two.
Or you're rich. That's a different conversation. Assuming that everyone deserves to be there, and then you are all in a class, and not every class, but some classes like your econ class, they implement a bell curve, so that there's always going to be a group of people around the middle, around the mean, and there's always going to be a group of people. I believe the percentage is 3.2%, who fall 2 standard deviations away from the average. So they're the small group of people who are technically the best. They're the ones who get an A. So that's where that comes from.
So what he's saying essentially is, if the class average took an exam, my econ exam, and everybody got a 86, which is graded as an A generally, that was the mean. That was the average grade in the class. Some people got a 92, and some people got an 83. What would end up happening is people who got an 86, that is generally considered an A, their grade coming back would be a 75. People who got 90s, their grade would be an 86, etc. And people who got lower than the mean, their grade would be like a 65. And the point is that it's not how challenging the test is, but you are solely being compared against your peers. Which, in one regard, I understand, because it gives a level of freedom to the professor to not have to test their students with like the perfect exam. Like, they don't have to work at very hard, to be honest, to like create a test that is challenging but not too challenging. And it makes it so that in a field of high level competition, the best are weeded out and are seen who they are, because it's just, you get a 95 in a bell curve exam, that means you did very well against your peers in the overall class. So you're smarter than most of the other classmates. The problem being, where I fucking hate it, is for 2 reasons. Is one, because it incentivizes us to not help each other. We're told, basically, rather than let's see if you can survive as peers, and let's see if we can help each other and everybody can get the best education that we're all paying for, it's, by me helping you, I'm making my chances of success less, because I'm being compared against you. So the more people that did good on the exam, the more people that said that was easy, diminishes the amount of time and energy you put into an exam and the amount of effort that you put into study preparing for it. And in this case, I'm livid because I memorized the fucking textbook, the first 3 chapters, and like honestly have lived,
working
slept
your ass off, just memorizing that whole thing.
Yeah, lived, slept, and shit economics for the last like
That's graphic.
3 weeks.
And might I add in there, it also emphasizes the differences among students in resources, in their ability to gain help, right? So like tutoring, right?
Yes. Oh my god, it
inherently
so does.
if there is that competition, a student with the means to get tutors, get help, even with all the available free online resources, which is definitely a good way to water that down, but still it still emphasizes that the difference among students who have the resources to further their own knowledge, further their own knowledge and ability in the course, to give them a better chance. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And this tailors into what you said about deserves to be there, and how I mentioned being rich, and you said that was a whole different conversation, because
so it's happening into that, huh?
I want to go into this because I have a bone to pick in some capacity, where there's a lot of people who, we know this, right? Like, they made it into university, UBC, into high-end universities because they're rich, not because they're academically gifted or they worked hard. Because the thing is they got the grades, but the reason that they got the grades that they did were because they were privileged enough to not have to worry about anything else but school, and also were given extra benefits from their parents, from their financial supporters, to get tutors, to get the highest level of helped education. And that doesn't even count the people who are literally just, their parents paid the school $40,000, $400,000 to let them come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not as an international student, because the way that internationals are treated, they have to pay $40,000. But like, as genuinely came here, like we all know, Stanford, this guy's dad built a building here. That's why he's at school. Like that's
Easily.
yeah.
Easily. There was the I'm sure you remember the college admissions scandal that happened. I forget who the fucking celebrities were, but it happened at USC.
Yes. Oh, what is her name?
It was.
Doesn't matter.
I should remember, but
no, I know who you're talking about,
yeah,
though.
you know what I'm talking about, and it's just that exact same kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
the prime example of that.
It works perfectly.
Might I add though, the saddest part is that there was all this outrage. It was a scandal, right? Like at the time, this is a public thing, but in reality, it's nothing different that's been happening, right?
Yeah.
The past like years and years, like it's only such a big that whole college admissions scandal at USC was such a big deal because it was between two celebrities.
Yes,
but it's nothing different. It's nothing like new.
No. That's like very common, but it happened because it's in the public eye.
Exactly.
Right. So it's funny though, because it's like, oh no, this is so bad. How dare you do this? But like, even here at UBC, which is supposedly, different than the United States, and we don't charge as much as you guys do. Like, it's really common, and I have a lot of friends here that are like that. I mean, I have one friend in particular who is like so rich that she told me she has a maid that cleans up after her and
that
takes
blows my mind, by the way. But anyways.
Yeah, I know, right? And in her world, she has such a limited perspective that she goes, everybody I know has a maid. But like she knows the maid, and I guarantee you the maid doesn't have a maid. But it's like the people that are around her that live in the IB or AP programs that she went to, they all had maids who took care of them. And they didn't go to these IB or AP programs because necessarily they were academically gifted, but because statistically people who come from upper households, psychologically upper middle class white households or rich backgrounds, statistically have a higher expectation of what they're supposed to be able to achieve, so they try for them.
Sure.
So they had the mean to do it, they had the financial backing to do it, but also they had the societal backing to do it, to have an expectation of trying. So an interesting statistic that my friend in psych class taught me recently. She said that most people who are brought up in poor households having the same natural cognitive ability will fail to succeed their possibilities or succeed what their highest potential is because of nurture and the surrounding society.
That's a very good point, because especially in a rich family who's well off, there is obviously a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of resources, a lot of capabilities that the parents, the prior generations are going to pass down to the progeny, the kids, right? And immediately that's just such a higher advantage.
It is. It so is. But what is kind of interesting to me is that people who got 86 in high school as their GPA and they weren't super wealthy, and people who got 86 in high school who were super wealthy, the person who got an 86 will apply for, who's super wealthy, will apply for Stanford, will apply for UBC, will apply for these schools, where even if, the other kid who was less poor got like a 90, not even an 86, they got higher grades, statistically, they won't make that application because they just believe, like socially, that they don't deserve it or they're not capable of doing it, or if they would try, it would be too expensive and then it wouldn't be a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, because they compare themselves to everyone else based on flat numbers rather than circumstance.
Yes, absolutely. And that's super unfair, because the thing that's so stupid about higher cost education and secondary education in particular is that the quality of education is so like cemented. I don't know, it's just the same. It's the same across the board.
It's not dynamic. It's the same curriculum that is slightly twisted. Like there's different, like you will have a 20-year textbook, and then like the next year the teacher will be like, hey, we have a new textbook.
Yes.
But it's still the same content. It's just like a different format in which like, it's presented to you. But yeah, you're right. It's the same material. There's no dynamic learning processes.
No, not at all. UBC doesn't revolutionize education in a new way. It follows a very standardized curriculum for secondary education.
And do you want to know why that is?
Why?
Because they expect that specialization, that the dynamic flow that is theorized should be in primary schooling or secondary schooling, they expect that to come later.
Okay.
So we had this conversation a little while back a few days ago when you asked me if I believe in what was it
Nature versus nurture. Oh, compound education.
Compound education.
Yeah, if I believe in education.
And I told you, like, yeah, there has to be a rigid base for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, how else are you supposed to learn? And to a degree, that's true. But it also exemplifies the nature of all primary and secondary schooling. Is
Yes.
that they believe you have to have the base, you have to have the essentials
Mm-hmm.
in order to move on. How true that is, how much of those essentials apply, I don't think it's that much.
No.
Which is why that all around education,
yes,
that exists, that's so rigid, is just the way it is, because there's expected specialization in the future.
Right, because like as you said, the more you advance, the more the overarching branches become specialized.
Right.
And you start moving away from foundations. But within the primary school, secondary school, high school stratosphere of education, you're moving up through everything. It is through the grades. It's very clear that it's a foundationary process and that kind of pyramid-esque building structure that's never ending. It is just foundation upon foundation upon foundation. Where in kindergarten you were taught basic arithmetic, how to read, how to spell, and then that applies with you how to how to spell applies to how to structure a sentence. Some reason, I kind of missed out on those years. I don't know what happened. They just weren't there. But then
you kind of skipped that chapter.
I kind of skipped that chapter. Learned how to talk, but I still can't write an essay for shit, and I'm in a specialized writing class.
You know what? You're doing pretty well.
But my point is that education, even in this area this like arena of academia, as the profs like to call it, is still a structure of foundation because we're in our first year, where it's like, okay, let's use my econ class as an example. This is how you teach macro 102. And when I was doing research for my exam and I was like doing practice questions and prepping them, they were all US questions. Like when I look at the US questions and then I compare it to my Canadian textbook, one of the questions that I can give, for example, was in the US criteria that was from 2014 and is the Stanford textbook, which is online, which is a thing that we can talk about, is how all of this information that's supposed to be specialized
Sure.
is public. Like everybody has access to it. University is supposedly a center of accumulated human knowledge, but we have the internet. So what does the university do? So that's a branching topic. But before we move on to that, the question in the Stanford 2014 textbook was, if Delta Air sells their old airplane to North Korea, is that counted in GDP? The textbook in my Canadian textbook, or the question in my Canadian textbook was, is if Air Canada sells an existing airplane to North Korea, is that included in GDP? One textbook was written in 2018 as the Canadian textbook, and one textbook for UBC, and one textbook was written in 2014 for Stanford. But it's the exact same question. All that's changed is the location of which country is selling it. And they're even selling it to the same person. They're both going to North Korea.
Question. Yeah.
By the way, if you're wondering, no, it's not counted in GDP.
Thank you. Also, fuck Air Canada.
Hey,
I just wanted to throw that in there.
Stop hemorrhaging my money, Sarin. Okay. So, but like, compound education, foundationalized education, and this idea that going to a prestigious university matters.
Let me ask you something then. I know you're on a train of thought, but I just want to ask this question. With compound education the way it is, what would be the alternative?
I actually don't think there is one. I actually like compound education. I like it. I think it's good.
I think the fact that it's so rigid, I don't think there is any other way, because you also have to consider primary schools, secondary schools, they cover all these bases, right?
Yes.
And for the primary reason that kids don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't know what they want. And to be fair, that's expected to change after high school.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And society pushes us to make that change now, right away.
Yes. So maybe it's a question of there's no problem with the rigidness of the school system.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just a problem with how long it's expected of us to take
yes.
to to figure ourselves out.
Okay, so I have an idea. I think that we could do two steps. One, we could change societal norms to push the enrollment of university further back, the enrollment of higher education, of not public education, because university is not publicly educated, right? You have to pay for it. Or, sorry, there's three. Or you make university education public, and that transitions into a conversation of socialism, but let's not go there right now. Or we make a regression in the amount of time that you are asked to decide what it is you want to do. And when I say that, I mean you are taught up into middle school or sometime around that. You'd have to be someone who truly understands human brain development to make this claim about when the most optimal time to do this is. But from a certain period of a young age demographic where you have built the foundations of basic arithmetic, basic English, maybe you can speak a second language, but you can operate and read and function through life with applicable knowledge, and that's it. Which honestly basically ends by grade 9, if you ask me. Beyond that, they teach you problem solving, but like pre-cal, things like that, those are not very applicable. Those are tailored-esque questions to a specific field you might want to enter into.
Okay, well there we go. That's how we change. That's how the theorized or the hypothetical rigidity of public schooling is changed, because you dictate. Okay, we live in 2022.
Yes.
What is necessary? What counts as applicable knowledge for the time that we live in?
Research.
If
you can research, 100%. If you have the ability to boot up a computer and function your way through it and find all of the information you could ever want, then in my opinion, that is the most useful skill. That's why my Center for Accessibility emphasizes the ability to basically be a drone, right? It's because when I got to university, they said disabled people are less likely to get a job. They don't want you as well. But if you're able to research fast, then you can subsidize that disadvantage, because you don't have to know things. You just have to be able to do research. That's why like disabled kids who take exams here, they're allowed to have a computer, is because, and they might be given less time to write an exam rather than longer. And what they're asked to do is you have to find all the answers on the internet. And if you're capable of using the internet as a tool to solve your answers, you don't have to know them. You just have to know how to use the internet. So I would say research would be number one, because you can see it in the least available people, like disabled people who are omitted from the labor force.
Sure.
They're being asked to do this, and children are also omitted from the labor force. So I would say research, but continue.
Here's an interesting one to add to applicable knowledge. So you're in solder, right? You're in a branch of UBC where you learned about business, right? You learned about how to start your own business. I'm sure. Stocks, all that. Econ.
Yep.
All that.
Arts one.
Arts one. Should primary and secondary schools teach you how to start your own business?
Yes, but they won't. They won't, because public and primaries and primary and middle schools and secondary schools are government funded, and because they're government funded, the government will decide the curriculum, and it is not in the best interest of a society or an economy for every person to accelerate to their maximum potential as an isolated individual, especially when the money that comes in to the governments to pay for public schooling is set up by companies who do not want competition. Is competition takes away from monopoly, and monopoly stops individuals from creating the system of competition that is supposedly how free market capitalism is supposed to work and regulate, right? So at this stage, I think they should, but I also don't think that in a world where government have less power than corporations, it'll happen.
And that's where our established flow chart comes in.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Of presume to go to school, presume to make your way through this, find the job that you're best at, but also you like the most, that'll make you the most money. I wanted to touch on something that came up through this, and it was this idea that you said about what would be the best option, right? I said research, and you said stocks and investing, and like talking about this branching idea.
Yeah.
And we did mention that a socialist idea that did kind of almost just come up there, but there's one more point that I want to run through, and it's an idea of picking your profession extremely young, and each student getting a tailored education towards that. And when I say that, I don't mean at 18 you decide what you want to do. I mean at 7 you decide what you want to do, and you make it very open-ended, but also specific, as you don't have to take other subjects. Like there aren't, like, to graduate high school taking Math 11 isn't mandatory if you're choosing to go in this path. And the reason,
you obviously know what I'm going to say to that.
That's not ideal. It's not going to work.
How can you expect a 7-year-old to make that decision?
Okay, so this is what
because it obviously impacts their life greatly.
Yes. Okay, so now this is an interesting concept. You take there's a giant test. There's a giant standardized test.
Okay.
And when I say standardized test, it is nothing like the SATs. It has no holds barred. It has nothing to do with academic intelligence. There is no grading. It is nothing like that. It is a psychological test that you cannot cheat because there doesn't make sense to know the answers. It is solely something to get an instinct of who you are as a character and as a person. Because as a child, you experience very base emotions and are not influenced by other people's opinions and direct nurture on you. You are influenced slightly, obviously, but much of how you perceive the world is nature. It's how you're born. That's why you don't see a black little boy and a white boy playing in a school in a sandbox and there being racism, because that doesn't register. It's just your friend, right? There is no ideology that has been opposed upon you yet. So to use me as an example, when I was a kid, I used to get in trouble for climbing trees. I used to get in trouble for running around. I used to get in trouble for wanting to play games. And my favorite thing to do was move my body. Being the person that I am, who's somebody who kind of believes in this philosophy, I realized that I'm the happiest when I'm outside and I'm moving and I'm enjoying life. And I looked at my options and I chose to become a fitness trainer. Not necessarily an end-all goal, but that's something that makes me happy. It's something that if anything here at UBC fails at, I could try and do that for the rest of my life if I wanted to. I don't want to, but it's at least something that would make me content.
So in your theorized example, you take a test when you're 7, right?
Yes.
It gauges your interests. It says, okay, this kid loves being active, loves the outdoors, loves, physicality, whatever, yes. Right? Maybe it deems that
they're good at talking to people.
You're good at talking to people, good at communication, right? Yeah. So it sends you on this arts course. Maybe there's a couple of environmental courses. Maybe you get into kinesiology.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't know, just that kind of thing. So you're saying then it starts you on that workout path, curriculum, right?
Yeah.
This diversified curriculum, and you end up in a spot right now where you feel like you are much more capable to tackle a career.
Yes, because it was slightly tailored. And I say slightly tailored because I am also a huge believer in foundations. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge believer in the idea that we don't know what to do. We don't know what we want to do yet in life. So give yourself as many options as possible.
My question is it always that linear?
No, but I think that's the thing that makes it better, is because the education system we have right now is already insanely linear and rigid. So even by making it slightly more open-ended, mm-hmm. where the kid who was a brilliant mathematician but couldn't write for shit doesn't have to take advanced English classes to graduate high school. He can outweigh his English grades with his math grades, and that can be his field of study because he loves to do it. And he can take everything that encompasses mathematics but doesn't have to worry about the writing aspect. And he can learn creativity, and he can learn other forms of human communication. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, instead of forcing you to do this standardized acceptance of basic education, everything is slightly tailored towards what each kid is good at. Because in an economy, maximum way to do efficient economy is productivity. That's the most important thing, is productivity.
Productivity and labor specialization.
Exactly. But productivity comes from labor specialization, which comes from education. Education is the most important thing in the world when it comes to a successful economy, when it comes to a successful society, when it comes to a whole society. That's why right now it's the best time in the world to ever be alive as a human, because we have the highest rates of global education ever.
And infinite resources.
And infinite resources.
Let me just
Well, not
let me just touch on that. I'm gonna continue to play devil's advocate here.
I like it
because I think it definitely is idealistic, that sort of diversified education pattern. So okay, let's say I am a parent, right?
Okay.
My kid Benjamin is 7-year-old. I'm an Asian parent in this scenario.
Okay, sure.
My kid Benjamin is entering primary school, right? And he takes his test, right? And he is put on this path to learn some basic math, but a lot more communication, writing based classes, right?
Sure.
Now, as a parent, do I like that? Do I like that he's only learning he's learning up to a very specific lower level of math? Even his interests aside, do I like that do I like the idea that his potential possibilities, no matter if his interests won't even take him there, to a point where he would even need those skills? But as a parent, I don't know that. Right. I'm sat there thinking, okay, are his options being limited by the public education system? Because right now, like especially with the scenario with you can look back retrospectively and say, okay, yeah, that would have made sense.
Yes.
But in the time, it would definitely feel like limiting options, right? Especially for parents who speak for their kids.
Okay, true. That is true. Parents do speak for their kids in a time when kids don't have the ability to give their own, like they can't say what they want. They don't know what they want. That's why kids can't get tattoos.
Right.
That's why, never mind, I'm not going to say that. That's why kids shouldn't make massive life choices at extremely young ages. Let's just say that. So I agree.
Unless you're me with my tattoo.
You're not a child anymore, technically. You're free to do what you want. And also, it's a pretty sick tattoo. So there you go. But I think that, at least in my world, I don't really see that coming up. Mind you, had a very isolated perspective when it comes to growing up. It's very different than the average person. But in my world, what I would see for myself and many of my peers back home was the number one goal, the thing that parents wanted, was your kid to be happy, was your kid to be happy in life, because that's what we all want, right? And people like what they're good at. So if you are good at something and you're having fun doing what you're good at and you're succeeding in this specific field, why would your parent not want you to pursue something that makes you happy? Because
I disagree.
Right
with that
now,
statement.
Right now,
you gotta finish that.
Right now, are you gonna tell me that you don't have freedom to study whatever you want, no matter what your mom says that they would like you to study? You have that choice now.
Well, yeah, we have that choice now, but I'm saying, when our parents have control of our decisions or what we do, right? I don't think it sucks to say this, but I don't think parents, or in general, if we're generalizing parents, I don't know if parents want their kid to necessarily be happy more than they want their kids to be successful. And I don't think both. I think both are, they're not. What's the word I'm thinking? They're not mutually exclusive.
I think that at the end of the day, I mean, this is why we should have a parent on we should have somebody who's raised a kid to talk about this. So we shouldn't delve on it too long because we don't really have an exact idea. But I inherently disagree with you, because I know that when I have a child, I know that even in my own life, if it became a choice of making $1 million a year doing a bullshit job of bureaucracy that I hate, that I personally feel makes zero impact on the world and doesn't help anybody or doesn't do anything at all, I would rather be a coffee barista, right, in one capacity. But fuck being a coffee barista, because I don't like making coffee. I would rather do something that makes me happy and make 1/4 the amount of money, because at least then I feel like I have a purpose, and you spend most of your life working. We spend most of our lives working. You enter the work labor force from 15 to 64. And you're not omitted from that unless you fall into 3 or 4 specific categories. And so I do not think that it should be a conversation of maximal money that you should make. I think it should be a conversation of doing what makes you happy that is still a job within this economy, within the free market economy.
Well, that is the goal for sure.
That's the goal. So why not hedge your bets? See, this is my problem. This is my problem with the way that the world works and the system works, is that we as citizens are asked to hedge our bets to trust the government, but we put the government in place. The majority chooses to follow what government says, so government has power. Rather than the majority chooses to put the government in place and the government has power and the government hedges their bets and invests in us. And that is my fundamental issue with how this system of education works, is we are asked to invest and trust the government instead of the government to invest and trust in us.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Could you describe your secondary, like your high school experience to me? Like, what was your high school like?
My high school was very fortunate. It was great when it comes to my experience with the high school itself. My experience in the high school, or like
your experience with the education.
Okay, my experience with the education. It was interesting. It was good. I didn't have a lot of complaint about most of it. There were some parts I really didn't like, but the way that my school's society was, fostered caring about school in a way that it was like I wanted to be there, and I didn't dislike it because the people who I was around kept it interesting. So the society kept me going through the school and through the education. And I am also not a common case, because liking to study and liking to mold your mind is not a common thing. So my experience was good, but I'm not sure how this helps.
Okay. So I'm just making a comparison to my school.
Okay.
Which is, this explains why we had that different opinion about parents' attitudes towards what they want for their children.
Right.
Because, so I went to school in Cerritos, California. It is southern LA. It is a county filled primarily with Asians.
Okay.
The school I went to had
the academic elite.
Demographic wise, about 5% white people.
Nice.
It was, side note, complete shift from my first high school, which was primarily like 95% white. So that was interesting.
We had 5 black kids in our.
You had 5 black kids.
5 black kids, yeah. Highly diversified.
And I knew at least 20 people who were being forced somewhere that they did not want to go because of their parents.
Right. Here's a question. How much money were they giving from their parents to do that?
I don't know. I'm sure their parents were covering them.
Okay. Because I think that that's very important to think about. Because parents with money want their kids to make money, and kids who are in that establishment may have an abundance of freedom because they have very little risk, but they also have very little self-choice, because they think that they have no freedom because your parents are paying them to go to school. So they have to go do the thing they don't want to do. They have to, because they don't have a choice to do something else, right?
And from that standpoint, parents are kind of enabling that, I guess, the system, the flowchart.
They are.
Right?
They are enabling your idea of educated flowchart. But that's the thing, is because our society, our North American society, says graduate school, get higher education. But the higher education that you get, we don't care what you've learned. We care about the credentials of the person or the institute that you get it from.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They care about the credentials of the institute you get it from. That's why the UBC education system is the same as Stanford, but Stanford is way more expensive. So because their credential, their reputation is higher, and they're a U.S. school. They have U.S. education.
So we've been kind of hinting or alluding to the fact that these big name schools aren't worth it. That they're just buying into a government endorsed system.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Here we are sitting in a UBC dorm.
Yes.
Talking about this, right?
Okay. Well, you had a choice.
I had a choice. So I wanted to get into this. I guess I'll start with you. So I just wanted to ask you, or have you talk about what your reason for going to UBC was.
It was the best option. It was the best option in Canada because I, unlike some of the people that we've alluded to, I'm paying for school, right?
Mhm.
I worked really hard. I got marginally lucky, but I also worked very hard. And I'm trying to pay my way through the world's biggest personal investment of my life. There'll never be another one that comes up with this. I couldn't afford to go to United States schools in the U.S. that have the same
No one can.
quote unquote reputation as UBC. And I think the UBC is better than SFU, even though academically they generally outpace us yearly. Sometimes we're number one in Canada, sometimes we're not. But UBC was the best option I could possibly get. It's why it was the only school that I applied to.
So for me, I mean, same kind of deal. I think for me though, it was a situation of I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to specialize in.
Right.
When I came here. So, for our few viewers listening at home, I had a choice between going to UCLA or going to UBC. And UCLA, I had a decent amount of money scholarship money to go there. I had friends I knew there. It goes close by home, so I had a lot of reasons to go there. But I decided to instead fly up to Canada to go to school here.
Start a new book in your life.
Start a new book in my life. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that this place had what I wanted.
Yep.
Two, which I think is an important part about the idea of education, is it's the idea of first knowing what you want and also opportunity cost, right?
Oh God. I can do a whole podcast on opportunity cost. I'm
For
sure we will.
For sure. But in this case, opportunity cost, because I'm a dual citizen. And for me, the information that I could get from a school that one I love very much, I've been here before. Two, had very good programs for what I wanted, knew what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a forestry major. I've been sort of a tree nerd for a long time. Big hiker, all that. It's funny. Everyone sees that when they first meet me. It's really funny.
Wait. Could we just take a pause for a second? You came from California to UBC to study trees and agriculture in the forest.
Yes.
I came from Salt Spring Island, a little hippie town, to study economics, business, and have a slight interest in socialism, sociology, and communism.
It's great.
The polarity there is excellent.
And so I come here because it matches my interests. I come here because I love the campus. I come here because I'm a Canadian citizen. So for me, I can mostly cover the cost, right? I got scholarships to come here and stuff.
Yeah.
So
good on you though, by the way. That's hard to do. It's a field that's challenging.
Thank you. So for me, it's this period in my time where I can really delve into something I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have the time because I got a fuck ton of credits from school, so I also have the time to figure out and start other aspects of my life while I'm not wasting time in furthering a different aspect of it, right?
So you had something that a lot of people didn't coming to school, which was you had a mitigated risk by working really, really hard in high school, right? You didn't come here rich. You didn't come here with financial aid, which is one capacity of mitigating risk. But you came here with work ethic, intelligence, and credits to a university because of how hard you worked prior.
Right.
And that gives you the chance to try something and put your feelers out.
Exactly. And it's also it was worth it for me. I say this because one, I was a small percentage of students who figured out what they wanted to do after high school, which enabled me to, I guess, buy into this flow chart, I guess for the time being at least, and not necessarily waste any time figuring out what I wanted to do when I could already start it.
Yes. You decided of your own volition.
Correct.
Right? Because unlike a lot of the kids who you mentioned before, who are being forced into the flow chart, you had the option not to.
Right, and I jumped into a pool,
Mm-hmm.
which I knew what it was.
Yes.
I didn't jump into any deep end.
Yes.
I walked into a pool and started swimming.
See, because I like that analogy for me, is because unlike you, I still don't know what I want to do, but my field of study is my whole mindset around this concept of advanced education, of secondary education, is investment in the self. And that's why I believe in the compound education as well, is because the studies that I've done in my first semester have been applicable to my studies in my second semester, even though they're not the same. I can compare them to, and it's because I can noticeably tell my abilities, my critical thinking, and my cognitive ability, and my problem solving advancing. But and that speaks to my whole reasoning for like my whole mindset about this education. But unlike you, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I came to school with, let's use it to again give me as many possibilities as I can. Like let's go study a field that gives me a foundation, that makes it so that at the end of the day, when I graduate from here, I don't have to be employed by somebody else. I can go do whatever the hell I want because I know how. I don't know what I want to do, but I know how to do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, you worked really hard to get your credits to come here. I took a gap year to figure out how to work hard and to figure out what it was that I like to do,
Mm-hmm.
and to build my safety net, right?
And so for the sake of discussion, I'll ask you this.
Yes.
What is the difference between our intention of coming here and a lot of other students?
I don't know. I don't know if I can put that upon like other kids. Do you have an idea?
Well, I mean, my guess would be what we alluded to before, is just walking into something because they have no other option without
Mm-hmm.
knowing really what they're looking for.
You know what? Actually, I think you're right, because I think it's actually not necessarily it's exactly no other option, but it's also very scary. The real world for some people is very scary, and the reason I know this is because about 3 weeks ago I was out at a party with some friends, and it was like 1 a.m. and I was like, all right, I'm tired, I'm going home. It's pouring rain outside, and I walk outside and there's just this guy sitting outside in the rain with an umbrella and a cigarette, and I go up to him, and I'm pretty drunk and I'm kind of high, and so I get kind of social at that point, and I'm like, yo man, like, why are you standing out here in the rain? He's like, oh, I'm smoking a cigarette. And so we started having a talk, and I wanted to I was just curious. Like, I wanted to ask about his life. I like to meet people. I like to get to know things. And it turns out that he is on his third master's degree. And I asked him, I was like, why? I'm in my first year. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself? He's like, I've been studying for 12 years. And I asked him why. And he had gone through so many programs. And it was because he never knew what he wanted to do in the beginning. He spent most of his life studying. And then he went out to the real world, and it terrified him. And he was scared. So for whatever reason he has, whether he'd rather just suffer in an unmeasurable debt and study, or he has infinite financial backings, he's choosing to, instead of work, instead of be in the real world, to hide in the safety net of, I'm studying school, which gives me a purpose in life.
And it's so if we're continuing this analogy of the swimming pool being university,
Yeah.
and real life
The
being
boot camp. It's education boot camp.
and real life being the ocean.
Yes.
This guy's just swimming laps in the pool.
Yeah, no, he's swimming laps in the pool because the real life is terrifying. You don't know what's beneath you. You don't know what's going on. And when you've done education a couple of times, it's easier. And I think that that's a part of it, is like, when education used to be cheaper, that's what it was. Is like, before we changed the policy so that governments would subsidize it would give you student loans. Before that came into effect, universities were far, far cheaper. They were growing in cost, like everything else does due to inflation, but they weren't the price they were. And people were able to work a job part-time and pay for education. It was a very common, affordable thing to do about like 1960s.
Right.
Like a ways back at this point, but
Yeah.
before they changed that system. And the reason is because you'd go to school and it would make you more intelligent, like you'd advance, you'd become smarter, but also you still didn't have to face the fears of the real world yet. Like it hadn't come into existence. You could still be in that place of, I have a purpose in life and some other entity is telling me what it is.
Yeah.
And that's to study.
You know why that story of the dude who's been studying 12 years kind of scares me a little bit?
Why?
Maybe not necessarily for myself, but in general, why that is scary.
Yeah.
Is because one of the reasons so many of us go to college is for that preparedness, for like for little. I want to keep using this analogy, for like a little inflatable vest.
So that when you jump in the ocean,
you don't drown, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that's a myth.
Yeah.
For some people.
I don't think it's a myth. I think it's a freeing concept. I think the idea of it is more attractive than it is in actuality, so they like doing it.
Yeah, the same reason like when you meet a girl you really like, and you and you make the mistake like, hey, am I super interested in the idea of her, or do I actually like her? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what university is.
Exactly, it's being interested in a girl,
yeah,
or the idea of a girl. You can't tell which one. For some people.
Right.
But something that I noticed in our buildings of this analogy, and I think it speaks to character and also speaks to mindset, is my analogy of university is jump in the pool with your arms tied behind your back with a 40-pound vest on and kick and try and survive.
Yeah.
So that in the real world, when I go into the ocean, when I go jump into the ocean, I'm gonna have nothing on me but a bathing suit, and that shit's gonna be super fucking easy. But your analogy is you wade into the water, you have nothing on you, and you learn how to swim the pool so that when you jump in the ocean, you have a floaty to help you out.
It's ironic, right?
Right.
But I think it also encapsulates it really well.
It does, because I tried the real world, and I really fucking loved it, and I'm now trying university, and it is so much harder than anything else I have ever done in my entire fucking life. Especially for me.
Right.
And like it's just so fucking hard. All right. My alarm went off. We do have to wrap up. I want to actually continue this conversation. I know we have other things to cover.
Yeah, that's fun.
But I really want to get into this idea of the regulated socialized education system.
That sounds fun. That sounds like a good part too.
Let's go. All right, Sarin, I appreciate you coming on. Let's do this again. And I have a feeling we got a new co-host.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's a good time.
All right, peace.